but.
Okay.
Hi, Göran, Michael.
Hello.
Hello, hello. I guess all the introductions have been made already.
Yeah, we know what to say. Most real content will come from Karsten today, I think.
Yeah.
And
I was also mentioning the hat trick, the coming triple. How do you call it? Hat trick, triple combo. I don't know how it's called when you have the three at the same time.
Triplet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's gonna be nice. I was looking into the state definitions because the misref at the beginning I didn't know what it was. So I was just looking into the various definitions. There is so many. I thought there would be fewer. The RFC editor states.
So let's wait a few more minutes, but for sure we need to wait for Karsten.
Sure. There's about, guess how many RFC editor states are there? I would have said 5, but guess how many?
20-ish. I don't know.
Ooh, that's closer, yeah. 15. For CNML data CT, Ari, Johnny. Ah, there he is. All right.
Hi, Ari.
Hi, Ari. And we have Karsten too.
And hi, Karsten. Yeah, let's wait one more minute. We are not strict on time today anyway, so. I'm sure Christian cannot join today. He told us.
So people should be coming in from the one-day meeting, which just ended.
Okay. Yeah, let's wait a bit.
So Christian then is in Jabber, but not in the Miteco yet, right?
Yeah, he's probably always in the Jabber room anyway. That's why.
The only reason why I'm not in the Jabber room is that I just rebooted my computer for a security update.
People are still joining.
Yeah, I just realized that the topic in the chat is perhaps a bit confusing. Points to the 111 notes.
Oh.
I was looking for a while. Oh, wrong date, but then wrong meeting.
Sorry about that. We didn't set it ourselves, so I don't know why it shows that one, but
we probably just haven't reset it since the last time.
These are the right notes anyway.
How do normally I set the topic with the Jabber? How do you set it on Miteco? Is it a quick thing to do?
I don't know,
or?
Actually.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but we are 4 past, so let's start the meeting now. So welcome everybody to this core working group interim meeting. This is Marco Tiloca, my co-chair is Jaime Jimenez. And of course, this is an official IETF meeting, so the note well applies. Be sure to get familiar with that if you're not already. It's not just about IPR, it's also about our code of conduct. So be nice and professional to each other. And we need some help with taking the minutes. The chairs can take notes, of course, but please volunteer to take minutes in the ACMD. So just a note before we go through the agenda, we are going to have 4 interim meetings, including this one before IETF 112, and the schedule is regular. So every other Wednesday, starting today, same time for each meeting. And it's alternating with CBOR as usual. The agenda for today is especially status update for a number of working group documents. I believe Karsten will lead most of those. So it's NML data CT, the CORE-Conf documents, and href and CoralWorks. Then we can have a discussion on the new proposed charter text that we circulated last week on the mailing list and in the CodeMD notes. And finally, I will cover a new draft related to OSCORE that was in the agenda for the July IETF meeting, and we had to skip due to lack of time. Does anyone want to bash the agenda for today?
I just wanted to see if we can have some update for the documents that are still in ISG evaluation. So the core SID and the young CBOR documents. I marked these revised ID needed some months ago. I don't know if it's like 57 days or it's 57 days since ISG evaluation, but they've been in there for a while, and they're currently blocked with 4 discusses on the SID document and 2 discusses on the young CBOR. And so I just wanted to know if the authors have implemented some changes in the GitHub, or if they're waiting on ADs, if I should do anything about those, or if we're waiting on the authors.
Well, that's on the agenda, but maybe I can answer now that we have pulled it up. So that's of the 4 CORE-Conf documents listed here. It's the first 2, Young CBOR and SID. And there were some really good comments, but unfortunately comments that actually require some thinking how to properly handle them. And I have been for 57 days trying to find a day where I can do that. That day might actually be tomorrow, but I already thought that a few times. So yeah, and that's a bit of a problem for me right now.
Sorry, yeah, I thought we were, when Marco said the CORE-Conf, I thought he was mentioning the other 2 documents that are still with the working group. That's why I brought this up now.
Michael is also asking about this in the chat, where comments can be found.
I assume.
I guess he means the ISG review, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
the ballot comment.
Yeah.
So I can just post the ballots in the chat.
By the way, I'm taking some notes, but I'll be welcoming some help.
I'll jump into. Okay.
So these comments generally have gone to the core mailing list. So if you look for something like discuss on draft IETF CORE-Yang, then you will find some things, or no objection on, or maybe just on draft IETF CORE-Yang, then you'll find them.
And by the way, just a note, because some of my other working groups were not aware of this, but not all if the AD doesn't tick a box saying might not get an email. So it's always good to check.
Good point.
Check the ballot. So in this case, everything was sent by email. So it doesn't apply to this one, but for other documents.
Yeah, but if you scroll through this, then you can see that it's not something that you can push in between 2 exams. So it really has to be a full day of work fixing all this.
I kind of remember some discussion in the mailing list. That's why I was wondering if there was anything on my side that needed to be done. But I also think that the discussion didn't conclude, and so yeah.
Okay, thanks. We can jump into the agenda, and well, Karsten, it's up to you for SunML Data CTS first item.
Yeah, so we had 2 reviews so far, Francesca's and the Gennard review, which was pretty nice from Christa Holmberg. So Francesca's review was really pushing the document forward. Thank you. And Christa also had some useful comments. And I have processed these comments with Ari, and we now have a -05, which I think is covering these 2.
Just a moment, Karsten. Marco, are you sharing the slides, or is Karsten sharing them?
No, and there are no slides uploaded available.
Oh, okay, so there is no slides for this, maybe.
I don't think Karsten uploaded slides.
Oh,
no.
Okay, sorry. I thought there was a mistake somewhere. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so we are still waiting for 2 reviews. I got a response from one of the scheduled reviewers that he would prefer to look at -05. And I didn't get a response from John Bradley. So I think these reviews will then come in with the telechat reviews.
Okay, so if all the comments were addressed, then I can just push the button and send it to the next telechat, which is in 1 week. Even though you won't be able to answer the comments, I think it's good to get the comments instead of waiting 3 weeks. What do you say, Karsten?
Sounds good for me. Well, I'm going to be on vacation in that week, I think. When is that? Next telechat? Yeah, 23rd. But you don't need me to be present for a telechat.
No. I'll press the button. Thank you, Sean.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Karsten. So it's the core-conf cluster now.
Yeah. So I already said where the first 2 documents are stuck right now. And the other 2 documents essentially have one big question for Komai that we have to answer, which is the lack of commonality between the encoding of the key parameters in the URIs. And we still haven't found out why we are doing this in this little bit weird way. So that's something I would like to find out. I mean, either we say, okay, it's okay the way it's done because we have a reason for that, or we don't have a reason for that, and we can streamline this so it's much easier to decode those keys. You don't have to know what the underlying Yang data types of the various objects are when decoding the keys for them, which is currently the situation. So this is the -Komai thing, and Yang library really somebody has to sit down and track everything that has happened in the Yang universe since that was done, because it's essentially a constrained version of a document that essentially has received a lot of attention in the Yang world. So this is a nice little exercise for a student. Unfortunately, I don't have a student working on that specifically at the moment. So having a more Yang-oriented person contribute to that. Michel seems to be very, very busy at this point, so I don't think he can actually do that work. So finding someone would be high on my agenda.
Do you expect to address all pending comments for Young Sibor and Sid before the cutoff?
I'm pretty sure, yes.
Okay, great. So they take priority, and the other two ones have to just follow.
I'm afraid, yes. I tried for too long to drag along all four at the same time, and it turned out that was a pretty bad idea. So let's do the first two first, and the other two in parallel, but with a slightly longer timeline.
Okay. Thanks.
So anybody who wants to volunteer in this space, I know that Michael Richardson is swimming in free time. I think he's gone to the other meeting.
Yeah, we'll write it in the minutes.
I can ask on the chat. Maybe he replies there.
Okay, but let's focus on Young Sibor and Sid first. That's already a lot. Okay, anything more on this cluster? Okay, so we wait for comments to be addressed. Okay, next is the pair href and Corel.
Yeah, so I think we have talked about href, and right now the situation is that we have a draft that pretty much works. We still have limited implementation experience. So I have a half implementation. Christian has a complete implementation. But we probably want to collect more experience with that. And last week in the CBOR meeting, I gave a quick indication of I wouldn't say problem, but a certain lack of smoothness that I'm currently experiencing with bringing href and CBOR packed together. So that's also something that we probably want to discuss in the context of doing this work on the implementations.
Yeah, we also have the implementation from Thomas around now.
Good.
By the way, yeah. And I think you also wanted to update yours and the test vectors you initially produced.
Yes.
I think some test vectors will need to be included in the draft itself once they are stable. That'll be very helpful. And most of the remaining feedback required from implementation was about the authority anomaly, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we really need to close that point, possibly add test vectors, and then in principle the document would be finished. So that should also be doable before the next ITF meeting, I hope. Is it doable for you?
I think so. It's just another thing on the to-do list.
Sure.
The problem with this Yang-Siba stuff is really that with a certain amount of load, one switches to shortest job next processing. And shortest job next processing has the well-known property that it is the best the best processing scheme to get to minimize average waiting time. But also it means you get starvation. And I really don't want Yang-Siba to starve.
Sure. All right. Is that it about href specifically? It should be really the last thing remain for that.
Yeah, as I said, I think we have it, but we have to validate that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, moving to Coral, I can start with an update because Christian and Thomas could not be here today, unfortunately, but the work is continuing. There are also design team meetings for that, mostly by the authors, in fact. And there's a lot left to do here, of course, but it was a decision to focus especially on two main points in the short midterm. The first one is the information model, about which Christian and Thomas already prepared some placeholder text to be considered as a pull request and to elaborate around. And in the near future, we actually plan to have additional design team meetings more specific on this point to try to align the Coral information model to SDF. So it'd be good to have some separate design team meetings on this aspect involving Michael Costa and other people interested especially in that. So that will come soon. And the second high priority item to cover is the diagnostic notation. And there are some building blocks, more or less under ongoing work can help. And in fact, Carsten mentioned something along that direction last week at the CBOR interim. So about this particular point, I was hoping for you to give an overview of that.
Okay, so I could simply recycle my last week's slides.
That would work greatly. Can you just easily share your screen?
Not really. Can you just pull them over?
I can try. It was.
Sorry, that was the wrong button.
So are you going to share?
Well, I can upload the slides, I
There you
hope.
are. Yeah.
Deck's
Well,
ready
if I may
to be
relay
shared.
the jabber
It's
just for a
loading.
moment. The comment from Michael Richardson is that he cannot spare time at the moment. He thought the young section was done. I don't know if the audio is not working, but if you want, Michael, yes, say it, go ahead and speak out loud.
Michael is in a different meeting, so he has to choose which audio to enable. So I didn't manage to upload that slide deck.
I can share my screen.
Thank you.
There we are. Just tell me when to change slide.
Yeah. Thank you. Next slide. So in the CBOR meeting, I quickly raised the fact that the Corel format has a binary representation, the interchange representation, and text-based representation. So this slide explains what Corel is. Next slide. Yeah, so we have the representation that we really care about, because that's what our applications will actually work on. And we have a bespoke text-based representation that is great for whiteboard and RFCs, but it has all those problems that we know from handcrafted examples, that then you suddenly start to optimize for the text-based representation. That's just how our brains work, and that makes it too easy to lose sight of what we are actually trying to do, which is to get the interchange, get the working with the interchange representation easy. So next slide. What we actually discussed, can't we just use CBOR Diagnostic Notation? And it turns out that is tedious, because if you do what href is asking you to do, which is parse the URIs and put them in a readily digestible form into a data structure, then you actually have to write up the data structure, and that becomes, well, unwieldy. So next slide. The idea was to actually go ahead and put an application-specific extension into diagnostic notation that allows us to specify the CRI for a URI that is given as a parameter of this extension. So we could say that there is this CoAP URI, and we write up the CRI for that, and that goes into the rest of the CBOR diagnostic notation. And that can be a URI, or it can be a URI reference, like in the next example, which is not an absolute URI, but it's relative to a base URI. So the overall syntax is patterned after the existing diagnostic notation syntax for writing up byte strings, where we expect the diagnostic notation tool to transform between the actual byte strings and hex or base 64 encoding. And here we would expect the tool to actually transform between CRIs and the human readable URI notation for that. So we got some positive feedback for that last week, and I think this is what we would do. So the next step would be to take a few examples that are currently in the Corel text-based notation, and actually write them down in the diagnostic notation. Of course, this also means that the implementations of diagnostic notation may have to be mixed in with the code for href. But yeah, that's the problem of having an application-specific extension. By the way, if that syntax looks familiar to you from Corel, Klaus actually proposed doing something similar for datetime objects. So we may just keep that part of the bespoke text notation and put it unchanged into the application-specific extensions. And of course, being able to notate a datetime is something that is not really very application-specific at all. So this might become a rather common use of diagnostic notation. So that's we had last week on this little problem. The result would be we would take out the text notation out of the base Corel draft. We might still want to have a bespoke text notation at any point in time that can be added at any time. So we are not completely giving up on the idea, but we are giving up on the idea of having it right out of the box. And we make sure that the CBOR diagnostic notation can actually represent Corel documents nicely. And the next step, of course, is to make sure that the CBOR packed approach actually works well with the query mechanism that has been part of Corel. So that's actually the rest of the slides, or the slide 7. So queries are a way using URI notation to build URIs out of a prefix and the rest that is given as part of the query. And that actually works great with CBOR packed. If you have something like scheme authority pair, coep/coep.me is a scheme and an authority. So these are the two first elements of the href array, and you can just use existing CBOR packed mechanisms to append a path array to that, and you have a valid CI. But it's much harder to do this for the next prefix, which looks very similar in the query notation. But if you look at this from a CI point of view, it's essentially a 3-element array with a scheme, an authority, and a path. And we don't have a way in the packed mechanism to actually reach into that array and append something to the inner array, the embedded array that already has a foo. So to get /foo/bar into a CI, you would need to say go into that array and add bar to that. So that's something where I don't know how we will get that element of queries in there. The same is, of course, true if there is also fragment syntax and so on. So some cases of doing that work easily. For instance, adding the actual fragment identifier, that works easily. But adding, for instance, a second query parameter, that again doesn't work. So I think that was the last slide I had last week.
Yes, thank you, Karsten. I think you mentioned also during the CBOR meeting a possible draft you had in LP1. I
Yes.
think that you may want to resurrect and may help with this. But I don't remember the details.
Yeah. So there are two ways to handle this. One is to handle it outside in by essentially saying this is packed reference and we reach into that data structure to put stuff in there. Or it can be handled inside out by identifying in the data structure where it actually is meant to be extended. It's a little bit like Christian's circumfix compression that he proposed for CBOR packed. So that's one way of addressing it. It's not going to look as pretty as queries, but queries have their own little problem because they are essentially doing string concatenation and then running the parsing on the concatenated string. They don't have actual semantics, so you only know the semantics after having parsed the strings, and we could have a more semantic way of doing query-like thing with CRIs.
Right, thank you. And to clarify, the main focus will remain on the diagnostic notation and the information model, and the two things can actually proceed in parallel, and they will. That's the plan.
Right.
Okay. Anything more or any more questions on href and Coral? Okay. Then we can move to the next item. It's the new proposed charter text. So it was promised to prepare a first proposal at IETF-111. The chairs prepared it, and it circulated on the list and on a CodeMD note, both linked here in these minutes. As far as I know, I couldn't see any feedback or comments yet. So we definitely need feedback and comments from the group before proceeding with this in any sense. But like intended at the last ITF meeting, it's not a revolution. It is the same overall direction, and it was more about updating the text to reflect what has actually happened and what is happening. And most of that was about touching the second half of the current charter, actually. The first part was mostly an editorial revision. So we really need input from the group. Even if you think unlikely that everything is fine as is, please say so on the list or commenting in line in the CodeMD where you need to be logged in to comment. And we plan to bring this up also at the next interim meetings to check the progress of this. And of course, if you have early comment input already to share today, please do. I was imagining Karsten to have something to say already, but
Yeah, so I didn't really do a diff of the two yet. So whatever comment I have is more on the meta side. So when CoAP was actually approved, we had very unlikely number of yes votes. I think it was 8 yes votes or something. I don't remember the actual number, but something that hadn't happened before. So we used to have an ISG that was very, very supportive of doing the CoAP work. And yeah, right now I think we have an ISG with several people that are, well, kind of annoyed of the fact that we sometimes get to do things that the big web doesn't get to do. And so they are loaded down by their baggage, and we just go ahead and sprint around them nimbly. So I think we have to be a bit more careful what we do there, so not to lose even more support in the ISG. So that's my general observation, and that's why I said, do we really have to do a recharter at this point in time? But maybe you can remind us why we want to do this.
It started out of spontaneous considerations among chairs and AD, and the two main reasons also stated at the last ITF meeting was, to make things easier and safer with the ISG, actually, because it became more often the case that they could bring argument like this is not in the charter or is not well aligned with the charter. Yeah. And it would also be helpful for newcomers to have an up-to-date idea of what is going on.
So some of the work is kind of at the limit of the charter, and that can create delays because then I have to take this on with the ISG and convince everybody that yes, it's at the limit, but it's still in charter. And I don't think anything we're doing is not in charter, but we could remove that type of objections to the work we're doing if the charter is reflecting what we're doing better.
Yeah,
But then again, I don't have experience with the rechartering process, and in the sense that I don't know how opposed to rechartering the a certain ISG would be. So of course we don't want to like add work, and we don't want to have this type of discussion for nothing. But my opinion was that a rechartering would help the working group.
Yeah, so what you're saying is essentially we are looking for an expansion of the charter, and what I'm trying to be a bit of a Cassandra about is that we might get a reduction of our charter. So that's just a perception that I have. It may not be true at all, but we have to be careful about that.
Yeah. Thank you for this opinion. It's good to hear others' opinions.
Well, I haven't done a diff of the two charters yet. It's not designed to be easy to do that diff.
So it's not super urgent anyway. We just wanted to put this in motion and do well as much as possible before the next IETF meetings. Then let's see where we get. But thanks a lot for this first feedback. Anyone more? Okay, and we'll solicit more also for additional feedback on the list again. Okay, then we have one more point.
Do you want to highlight what is actually being changed? Because again, it's not that easy for me to extract that.
Simply in bold on the ACMD, you mean? Something like that, or something more sophisticated?
Well, maybe just talk about it.
Well, some documents were mentioned still as draft, including blockwise, I think. OSCOR wasn't even mentioned. There was a vague mentioning of using COSI or investigate the use of COSI, like things that happened for HOSI before. Yeah. I think T2TRG was still mentioned as a proposed research group, and href and CORAL weren't mentioned, and I couldn't see something that was in a safe way letting imaging about href and CORAL, for example. Out of my head, of course. So it sounded like better to be on the safe side on these things.
Yeah, I see the addition to the object security. That's certainly a useful thing. Oh, Francesca has a diff. That's actually about as good as I get from Emacs.
Thank you.
Yeah, it has a hard time picking up the correct correspondence.
There are also just editorial changes, of course, or trivial updates like draft to RFC and so on.
Yeah. Good. Okay, so that needs to be checked offline, and just because I didn't have a good way of diffing it, I didn't do that yet.
I'm thinking if we could backtrack from the Google Doc to the original document and then share that as well, maybe that's easier to check the changes.
Is it in the GitHub, the charter? I forgot.
No, it's only in that HackMD.
Maybe a GitHub would be a good idea. Add one repository.
Yeah.
Right.
In particular,
guess we
GitHub that is actually based on the current charter.
Yeah.
We could upload the current charter to GitHub and then just copy paste one by one all the previous changes we made, including the editorial ones. It's a bit of
So
work, but
Michael Richardson has a comment in the chat.
Yeah.
I found that the group security work was, well, it's very important, but it was also very intricate. And I don't know if we're done the stage of it, but I think that at the very least it should maybe get a more clear design team to iterate on things and present the results rather than try to design them within the working group constraints of time.
You mentioned ACE in your comment.
Oh,
so
I don't know if that's the right answer.
Well, you can go to finding that answer from principles, but you also can look at that working group. And to me, it seems that it's pretty dysfunctional at the moment. I mean, I don't.
Well, it doesn't have a clear. It doesn't have a clear focus because it's done its core work and it has a whole bunch of little things, and probably it probably just needs to finish its work and shut down, not try to adopt something new. But I guess I would say that the kind of, like, I want to point out, I'm sorry, I had another meeting that took up the previous 45 minutes. There's a lot of caretaker work that I think that we're in core that we don't always get to, and the Yang SID stuff is an example, and I think of this as being a caretaker working group that needs to actually spin off other things to do the work, to do some of the work.
Yeah, except that all these spin-offs are opportunities for people who like to kill work to do that. So
I agree with you. And then we get into scheduling conflicts, and we don't get enough people because there's too many conflicts. And so that's why I'm saying maybe that's why I recanted as I wrote it, and thought, well, maybe it just needs to have a more structured design team around it, so that it has the time to get where it needs to go.
Yeah, the Node working group has a design team on versioning and labeling that has been meeting, I think, weekly for a year or so. So that's certainly one way to handle complicated problems. So the main reason to put something into the ACE working group is to employ the fact that it has a security AD behind it.
Yeah, and also that I think that ACE has concerned itself a little bit that this is a product. My impression is this is a product that is designed, for instance, for sending a turn on all the lights message, and ACE has certainly got the authorization behind that there. And I don't know if we're creating, I'm unclear whether we have two solutions happening or complementary ones or ones that build optionally on each other. Joran has some comments too here.
Yeah, so about the Grupos core, there is actually a design team. So, but it's not like presenting itself as now the design team is presenting its results. It's more like there are reviews of the ongoing work by a set of people. And one example of that is there was a paper, or sorry, it was a preprint by Erik Thormarker from Ericsson on the properties of what kind of properties you need to put in the key derivation, what kind of information you need to put in the key derivation to allow certain attacks. And that was sort of led to a change in Grupos core during the spring. So there is actually a design team behind this. And I don't see the benefit of moving anything of that work to ACE. ACE is doing, as you said, the complementing part, which is how you get the keys in place, but it's not dealing with the actual communication security or security for groups and so on. So that's my view of things. And happy to ask other comments. We could be more clear also, maybe who has been reviewing what, but there is a set of people behind the Grupos core work. Didn't mean to kill the discussion. Go ahead.
It was very pertinent, actually. You have more points, Karsten?
No, so that was kind of off topic from the charter discussion. I do think that we have a pretty clear delineation between ACE and core. So getting the keys in place is maybe not exactly the way I would put it, but that's at least a good first approach for the things that have to happen in ACE. And we are trying to make sure that we can actually communicate based on that. So I haven't checked the charter whether it actually reflects this division of work. So that seems to be a pretty obvious addition to what needs to go into an updated charter. The updated draft names are also an obvious thing, but it's not quite clear to me that the rest is doing very much. I mean, it's nice to fix grammar and things like that, but yeah.
So what I would suggest is that the working group takes a look at the list of documents currently adopted by the working group, and just check with the charter and see how well these fit, because that's what started this discussion with me and the chairs. And I could foresee some discussion in the ISG about how fitting some of these documents are with the current charter. And if the working group believes that this is work that it's not worth doing, the rechartering, to have this better alignment, it's fine. I will take that discussion with the ISG when it comes. But yeah, that's I think what needs to be looked at.
And yeah, you probably have.
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
You probably have a better handle on the amount of hostility we can expect from ISG. So maybe my hunch here is misguided.
I got the impression that this IESG is very careful with checking the charter, and it's more about, you know, it's very nitpicking on that, and that's why I'm bringing this. But
Yep.
Again, I haven't had the experience of how painful it is to go through the recharter. Yeah, recharterings take time and discussion and effort, but I can kind of investigate that, with some of my fellow ADs and see if that's a good idea or is it not worth it.
Great.
Joran has more comments in the chat. Do you want to relay them, Joran, on the mic?
Well, yeah, I just posted what I think it was the latest version of the ACE charter. So I think there's a nice tie-in there to what's happening here. So it's talking about what is needed for applicability of group communication. It doesn't say put the keys in place. It's at applicability, which is better, of course. It's authorization and other stuff as well. And then it says also that it applies specifically to the security protocols that are relevant for co-op. So I think it fits well.
Okay.
Would it help if we move the charter to the GitHub repo to be able to track changes, or is it a waste of time?
Michael?
Yes, please do that. I guess you have to wait to unmute till you're really finished speaking.
Oh, no, that was all. Well, okay, then I will do an attempt, and I'll share the link in the chat. I think if Marco is okay, we can do it on this repository. Yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Fantastic.
So we will do the changes little by little, backtracking the steps.
Great.
Yeah, like one paragraph at a time or so.
It's also okay to do them all at once if you want. I don't think that the working group needs to see like a paragraph at a time. I think.
No. Yeah, I mean backtracking in the sense like we will look back into the original document and just do it at once. One commit. No need to do 20 commits, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
So one commit with all the changes we've made. Okay.
But yeah, no need to do.
Yeah, I will probably take the original charter, make big sausage paragraphs out of the paragraphs, and then put in the new charter again in the form of sausage paragraphs. So you actually don't see a ton of, oh, there's a new line break here and so on, but you actually see the differences in the text.
Yeah, I will take care of the line breaks as well.
Thank you.
Okay, that was a good discussion with first input already. And we'll send a ping to the list anyway to solicit more reactions. Okay, if there's nothing more on the charter, we can move to the next and last point in the agenda, and that's another presentation. Right. So this new draft was submitted before the IETF. I should share my screen for my camera. This draft was submitted before the previous IETF cutoff, following a number of discussions started in other documents. And it basically describes how to use OSCORE at proxies. So thinking of intermediaries as consumers of OSCORE. And why is that? Well, you may need to have a security association between a client and a proxy, to put it simple, for the number of reasons. And we have some use cases where that makes sense or is needed to happen. And they are in the draft and a few in the coming slides. The moment you have a security association between a client and the proxy, it would be good to have it based on OSCORE too. And especially in the case where you're using OSCORE already end-to-end between client and server. So for the sake of stack simplicity, code reuse, key provisioning, and so on, it's just better to use OSCORE again, also in that communication leg. Now, if you look at the current OSCORE RFC, of course, the only intended consumers of OSCORE, or OSCORE endpoints, as we call them, are just the origin client and server, of course. And you can also imagine that if you start from end-to-end OSCORE and you add an additional OSCORE protection between, say, the client and the proxy, you end up protecting a message twice in a row. And that's not only undefined, but it's actually forbidden today. So this is not really possible right now. A concrete reason to do that started in another document, GroupCon Proxy, where we started to think along these lines in an appendix. This came up again at IETF 110 and at the following interim, and there was some agreement about having this particular point taken out from that document and to be better explained, elaborated, scrutinized in a totally separate draft. Also because it seems to have more generic applicability that in that GroupCon Proxy context. And the result is, in fact, this particular draft that we made. A recap on the use cases is also summarized in the draft. One I mentioned already, the GroupCon Proxy case that started this out of comments from Christian, actually. And here you have a client that wants to reach a group of servers through a proxy that practically sends out the request over multicast. You may have group OSCORE end-to-end between the client and the servers. And here the proxy has to identify the client before just forwarding over multicast request. And here again, a security association and the advantage of having it based on OSCORE, as I mentioned before. A second use case is kind of still related to group communication, but in a different way. You can have a server sending multicast notifications to multiple clients observing the same resource. Those can also be protected with group OSCORE end-to-end, and you may have a proxy deployed. And in that particular case, an additional step is required by the clients to provide a particular reference request to the proxy, to put the proxy in a position to do the job. And we are already discussing in the security considerations of that document, observe multicast notifications, that it's just very good idea to protect that particular reference request on the leg between client and proxy. So you have the same thing again. And third one we mentioned is related to lightweight M2M. In the 1.2 version of the standard, thinking of the OSCORE case, so OSCORE used in the registration process to the lightweight M2M server, it is mentioned as OSCORE can also be used by the lightweight M2M client to establish a communication with an application server external to the lightweight M2M domain, using the lightweight M2M server as a proxy. So here it comes again, the lightweight M2M server that has to recognize the lightweight M2M client as it does as usual anyway, but here especially for forwarding traffic out of the lightweight M2M domain. And you end up performing a double protection of that message again. We had some discussion with Christian also that suggested something more like how this can help for third-party proxies using OSCORE for the new transport indication work he proposed. And he also suggested to think about other kind of proxies acting like network entry points, like big firewall and so on. So given this context, the contribution would be about updating the OSCORE RFC to make this possible. And the update, before coming to defining the actual mechanics of how this works, is about enabling OSCORE to be used also at a proxy and intermediary, just like origin client and server do. And also explicitly admit what is now forbidden. So having what is called nested OSCORE in RFC 8613. And in the current version of the draft, we actually limited this to exact 2 OSCORE layers, possibly applied to the same message. But out of some more discussion with Christian and Joran, it is actually possible to do and interested to explore to not put this hard limit. Because it is possible, first of all, with no particular additional effort, and it can be actually useful in some very particular cases to be explored more. And the focus here is on OSCORE in particular, but you can take this as is, and it works just as well with group OSCORE too. During the design phase of this, we found pretty useful to come up with a notation like this, and we got also among the feedback that, well, that was fine during the design, but it's just better to get rid of something like this that can be too heavy to read and to process, because this in the draft evolves into a pretty fine-grained description of the message processing, and we already have in mind how to work in that direction. But to better understand at least this first example, focusing on colors, if you think of the most simple example, one client, proxy, one server, you can independently use OSCORE between client and proxy, yes or no, between proxy and server, yes or no, or end-to-end between client and server, which is the only possibility admitted today. And that, of course, results in 8 possible configurations, as we call them. Again, mostly at the same time to be sure we weren't missing any corner case. But we'll hopefully get rid of most of this heavy notation in the next version. Without going into any detail at all, the idea is that the client can, first of all, protect a request end-to-end with OSCORE, as usual. But then if it has also, or only, an OSCORE context shared with the proxy, it can protect the request additionally also with that context. This can result in a double protection as a particular case. And the interesting deviation here is that some of the options are really intended for the proxy, and it makes sense to protect them when performing the red protection here. In particular, the proxy-related co-op options. And it would be also about protecting the OSCORE option that was produced from the first perform protection. That will be encrypted, and the result of the second protection will be a new OSCORE option that will be sent as outer option on the wire. You reach the proxy at some point, and we realized, but didn't explicitly write in the draft, that we are not adding, and we don't need to add any particular new explicit signaling as a hint about what to do. What we already have around the options included and their combination is already enough to understand what the proxy in this particular case is supposed to do. At the end of the day, it either forwards to the server according to what the proxy options say, or it delivers to its application if it has any at all, or, well, it decrypts the message according to what the OSCORE option says, and possibly repeats this cycle depending on the result of that decryption. If the decision is to forward, well, it can protect the message again if it is sharing an OSCORE security context with the server. So for the server point of view, it's mostly about being fine in receiving something which is possibly double protected. And then when it comes about producing a response, it has to think in a similar way that the client thought. And it is possibly a double protection if you involve both OSCORE end-to-end and with the proxy. The proxy thinks in a similar way for forwarding back. And at the end of the day, the client has to be fine in accepting something double protected, so to strip out of the message two OSCORE layers rather than one. This is really the high level intuition, and right now the draft has a very fine-grained step-by-step description, too detailed, we realized, of the message processing. And about all this, we got pretty good reaction and comments from Christian and Joran around the IETF-111 week. We learned especially that the use cases look good, and there can actually be a few more. And the overall process makes sense, but it's presented in a far too complicated way, especially considering the flags and the configurations I showed before. So out of their suggestion, the plan is to do a major revision of the presentation of the message processing to make it a more general, high-level algorithm where you can almost forget that the message is now processed exactly at a client or proxy or server. It's just about following what the set of options tell you to do. We have a new version of this description sketched already, and we have to work more on that, of course. And a nice side effect is that it'll be much easier to apply it right away also to a chain of proxy, because here we focus for the time being only on one proxy. And we also want to think more about having more than just two layers of OSCORE protection. And again, from early discussion, this seems totally possible, and it can lead to something pretty promising. But it's not for the immediate next update to explore fully anyway. Yeah, so the plan is to work on a version 1, especially adopting the comments we got, and especially on the presentation of the message processing to make it easier to read and to extend to a chain of proxy, and already to mention possible additional usage of this, and start thinking on the triple, quadruple application of OSCORE layers. So we're pretty happy with the feedback so far already, and we have a lot of clear work to do. Of course, more comments, input on this are very, very welcome. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe the reason nobody says anything is that everybody agrees with what you have been saying.
That would be fantastic.
Clearly, you want to describe it in such a way that you have per layer processing rules. So given that the inner layers actually protect. Well, I'm using a different inner and outer here. So the longer range layers actually are protected by the shorter range layers. The shorter range processing actually cannot understand what's going on in the longer range.
Correct.
So
And
by
that's
definition,
intentional.
this thing must be nestable.
I like longer range.
Okay.
Michael?
So are you assuming that all proxies are, I want to say known, I mean to say are clearly discovered or on the en route? Or
no, you don't need to assume that. You need to know as a client, say, you're next up in the normal use case, and that's it.
Well, sorry, you say next hop. My first proxy, you mean, or my final destination?
You need to know your final destination anyway if you want to use OSCORE with it.
Yes.
If you have a chain, you need to know only the entry of the chain to use OSCORE with it.
I have to be the entry of the chain has to be known to me. It can't be that it just inserts itself in the middle and proves that it exists.
It has to be known because you want to use an OSCORE context share with it. So yeah, you need to know it. And I expect anyway, most of the cases are not about a chain, are about one proxy, but you never know. You may have a chain, it would work. Then the thing goes hop by hop.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any more comment, opinion? Göran?
Yeah, just to comment on Carsten's statement. No one is saying anything, so we assume they agree. There is no news here from my point of view. This was what you intended to present at IETF 111. Sorry, I'm not saying the right thing. Most of the content here is what you intended to present at IETF 111, and that's what we commented on. And then you made this update, which looks really promising, but we haven't really seen the details yet. So we're waiting, looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I guess there are no more comments. We are on the any other business area. Does anyone want to raise any more point today? If no, then I think we can adjourn the meeting. Do you have anything more, Jaime?
Just saying that the charter is now the diff available on the GitHub repo and is in the minutes, and that's it.
Thank you so much. Okay, if there's nothing else for today, we can adjourn the meeting. Francesca.
Christian is not here, so maybe it's not worth talking about it, but I wanted to hear if there was any update on the request tag as well.
Last thing I saw and that I remember was a mail from Ben. Actually, yeah.
And I'm asking Roman to comment if he's happy with the resolution as well, but I haven't gotten any answer from him yet. So yeah.
So my understanding was that the ERT was on the. I'm checking the data tracker, but it's on the ISG at the moment, right? Or right? It is.
Yeah, it's approved announcement to be sent, which means that it has cleared the ISG evaluation, but so there was no blocks, but there was a number of comments, and the authors have been working on addressing those comments. And of the 4 ADs who had comments, I followed up with Martin Duke, and Murray, and they were happy with the resolution. So the only 2 left in these comments are Roman and Ben. And Ben has replied to Christian's answers, so it's back with the authors. And Roman has not, I don't think he has had time to look at the reply. So that's the status.
Because I mean, as maybe the people in the call are not aware, but there is the other 2 pending documents from a normative reference. So we will get the hat trick when this is done, basically. Or I don't know if that's the term again, a triplet or whatever is the term.
I guess.
So yeah, I mean, anything we can do to speed it up.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the core new block and
resource directory. The resource directory was also waiting for ERT.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see that in my list of documents, but that's probably because it was before me.
It's cluster 280.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Will we get consecutive numbers? Well, anyway, it's a minor thing.
We'll see. Okay, any more points to raise for today? Anyone? If no, then we can adjourn the meeting and have a good rest of the day, evening, depending where you are. Talk to you in 2 weeks latest. Thanks for today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.